Welcome back to the Mainstream. John, how are you going?
I'm very well, Dan. Since we saw each other last, a lot has happened. I've experienced the sights of Berlin and modern-day Germany, and you've been smashing it at CPAC.
Yes, I was at CPAC, and that's an annual conference that happens. This year it was in Brisbane, and CPAC is the it's an American conservative conference that was brought here by Andrew Cooper. A number of years ago, I had the opportunity to give an address there over the 2 days, many different
I watched you on YouTube. It's a great 15 minutes. What did you talk about?
Well, I enjoyed it, so I'm glad someone else did.
The whole room cheered you.
Well, they were told to, I think, but...
No, we love Australia.
We do love Australia. No, I talked about the flag because I love the flag. We've talked about the flag a lot. And what I want to do is I want to give you a quote.
You started your speech with this.
I started my speech with a quote. So those who have seen my speech will know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to give this quote to you about our flag. And I want you to guess who said
I know
this.
who said it, but I'm going to reply as to who said it, as to how the media might present.
Well, okay, that's a good point. So I'm going to start this quote.
So I know who said it.
Okay.
But it's great anyway.
Well, if you haven't heard the speech, think about who you think this might be. The passing of a statute which defines and describes the Australian flag is an important event in the history of the nation. The flag that is now Australia's national flag, which is based on the blue ensign, is a very beautiful flag.
Well, that's a controversial statement.
It is probably the most beautiful flag in the world.
Well, how good is that?
Quote. So who said
yes, so the media would present that as a Pauline Hanson type statement.
They would present it like that. It was a former leader of the Labor Party.
No.
Doc Evatt.
Back when the Labor Party didn't hate this country.
Back in the 1950s, talking about in relation to a bill that was going through Parliament to establish the blue ensign flag as our official national flag.
Fantastic.
And now we have a leader of the Labor Party and a Prime Minister of our country that not only does not believe that it's a beautiful flag, but won't even stand in front of it. Doesn't that capture how the Labor Party has changed?
Well, it's captured how the Labor Party has changed. It's captured the narrowing of our identity, of the things that bring us together, and it's been allowed to happen. So when you told the thousands assembled in Brisbane at CPAC what was their reaction?
Well, it's very positive because they don't hear it, right? They don't hear this from many political leaders. And, it was interesting about, what was the mood like. So the people that are here are very engaged. This is really the base of the base when it comes to conservatives in Australia. It's not Liberal Party people necessarily, a lot of supporters of different parties, but a lot of uncertainty. There's no galvanising force.
What was the feeling? Well, compare it to the feeling last year.
Well, last year there was optimism. There was a very convivial atmosphere because
we had Trump coming.
Trump was coming. We had beaten the Voice. Albanese was on the ropes. Peter Dutton was hitting his strides in talking about culture and values and things that matter to mainstream Australians. The year before that was 2023, and of course it was all about the Voice, and there was a lot of nervousness because we didn't know how it was going to go, but that was the galvanising force that we have to vote no to save Australia. This year there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of lack of direction on the centre.
So where are people looking to for leadership?
Well, it is largely coming now from, I think, Andrew Hastie over the last couple of weeks, he's probably been the individual that has started to discuss some of the issues that actually matter. I don't know if you, in your time over in Germany, had an opportunity to see what Andrew Hastie had to say.
Well, I did in between shakeout runs from landing in Berlin and doing the marathon with my daughter. I was able to get internet access, and it was interesting for me to look at Hastie talking about immigration, topics, of course, that Jacinta Price, who also spoke at CPAC, discussed, and the reaction from Australians to Hastie's comments and Price's comments about immigration, social cohesion before that. When you are in the capital of Germany and there's only one topic that anyone... Well, there's actually two topics that people want to talk about. They want to talk about the fact that Berlin is 80 kilometres away from the Polish border, and that social cohesion, such as it is in Europe, is fraying. It was just a few days ago that the AfD made electoral advances in a number of provincial elections. And the feeling in Europe is very real about the future of the community, their economic future. And the second point that people want to talk to you about is they're relying on Trump to solve Ukraine. And while the Germans are importing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gas and their energy supplies rely on Russian fuel, the Germans are living in fear of what Russia might do next. So it's a very difficult predicament in Europe, which at the minute no one can see a way through. And so reading this from what Hastie said from a Berlin hotel room, I'm thinking, well, Australia's catching up to the rest of the world and having these debates and discussions. And then I see Hastie being told, and Price had been told before that, to shut up.
Get on the team.
Get on the team. You have former Howard ministers, you have former Turnbull ministers saying, no, don't talk about this, don't lead the debate, just discuss economics, as opposed to what I would have loved to have happened and what must happen, not just for the Liberal Party, but for the Australian polity, is there should be a dozen Andrew Hasties having these debates. So we had the member up in Toowoomba, Garth Hamilton, who of course did an important piece for the IPA review on family tax policy and what directions for tax the coalition should be taking. There should be lots of Hasties and lots of Garth Hamiltons arguing, debating, saying this was right, this was wrong, this is where we have to learn. But instead they're saying, shut up and let's have a party review that will go for months and months and months, which is why Susan Lee hasn't budged in the polls at all. And if anything, the Liberals have gone backwards.
They have. And for those of you who have not seen what Hastie has said, it's worth going to his social media.
He talked about cars, and you love talking cars.
I do. But if you go to his Instagram page, you should check out the video. But there's a couple of things here that I just wanted to read out about what Andrew Hastie actually said. So he said, I think we should be a nation that has an industrial base and is capable of making things to be proud of, like our history of Holden and Fords.
Were you Holden or Ford?
More Ford.
Even though you're from South Australia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really know why. He talks about how Liberals and Labor have let us down in the past. He has this great point about electric vehicles, that they're silent, soulless cars made in China, packed with technology we didn't design and that we don't control. And of course, he talked about the need to have coal and gas, and that he's ambitious. He said, I am ambitious for my country. He asked the question, what sort of country do we want to be? I mean, isn't this... Now, put aside the personalities, because the media always dissect...
Put a leadership prism on this.
Put that aside. Just listen to the words that he's saying. Isn't this exactly what we need to do right now?
Well, I would argue so. And of course, the other reaction, other than just stick to economics, don't talk about culture, don't talk about society, don't talk about social cohesion, was the claim of some of his critics, both liberal and non-liberal, saying, oh, that's nostalgia. Well, maybe, but when we talk about faith in the community, faith in ourselves, post-war Australia, nostalgic as it might be, had faith in itself and had faith in the country. Less and less people are believing in that today, and I don't think Hastie is wrong to draw a comparison between Australia in the past, for good or for ill, and where we are now.
When we used to make cars, we were a real country. Now, that doesn't mean that making cars again, if we could, will turn us back to a country that's a real country, but it's an important point to remember. And one of the main criticisms of this line of argument about whether it's car manufacturing or other forms of manufacturing is it relies on some form of protectionism, which is economically inefficient. Yes, that's true. It is more expensive typically to produce things here than elsewhere. Yes, it is probably true that we would not have had a large industrial base, let alone a manufacturing sector, particularly of cars, in the absence of government protectionism. That's all true. But what a country produces and the structure of a country's economy is not just about a unit of production. It's about our way of life, it's about our culture, and it's about what kind of jobs will be available for the community. And so we know, for example, that we used to have lots of walk-up jobs in factories and manufacturing plants that were available to people who didn't go to university, who didn't go to TAFE, who left high school, and they could still get a good, decent job. those jobs are not there anymore. And we know that that's leading to a lot of marginalisation and disengagement of particularly young men who have fallen through the cracks of society. Now, I'm not saying that means tariffs will fix all the problems, but what I'm saying is let's think about the social and cultural components of what our economy allows people to do. That's the point of this.
And I think people who just focus on Hastie calling for a bringing back of car manufacturing misunderstand the point he's making. I'm not quite sure he was saying that. He's saying something deeper around the economy is not, and economic efficiency is not the be-all and end-all of a community and a society. And again, I was struck by this idea that when people said to Hastie, well, you can't hearken back to the past. Well, okay. In the 1970s, the average house price in Australia was 3 times annual earnings, and families or female reproduction was about 3 children per woman or per family. Today, the average house price is 10 times the average annual salary, and female fertility is down to about 1.5, which is less than the reproduction rate of 2.1 children per woman. So if a society isn't wanting to reproduce itself, if a society isn't going to see a future in growing, we have very fundamental challenges. And I think Hastie and others talk about the civilizational moment that we are in. And I think we've also seen that Australian politics, the Australian media, is so unused to anyone taking the future seriously that they can't deal with a Hastie. They can't deal with a Jacinta Price saying, make Australia great again. Well, yes, absolutely we should. And the media goes berserk at this and says, you can't say this. We have forgotten how to deal with big ideas, with existential ideas, with moral questions, because our media, our political elites, our political class is so enamored with technological and technical managerialism and experts that any of the big questions that politics used to be about, such as, are we a nation or a nation of tribes? What is the role of the family? Is the civilizational decline of the West preordained? No one can deal with these questions because we have been so dumbed down, and people like Hastie dare to ask these questions. And I'm not sure that he has all the answers, and I'm not sure that anyone has all the answers, but he's asking them, and that is a world away from the claims that we've seen over the last week in response to Hastie, which is, well, no, just talk about economics. And this was an article in the Australian Financial Review suggesting that the way the Liberal Party can increase its vote is declare war on the boomers and tax unearned income, i.e. put a tax on the family home, consider death duties, and start an intergenerational war and favour young people. Now, intergenerational wars like class warfare seldom suit anyone, and no one's the...
But also the point of the Liberal Party, as I've said before, is to be a national party. It can't be a sectional party. This is the point that needs to be drilled into their head. As soon as you start being a sectional party that divides the community, whether it's on intergenerational lines or other lines...
Or class lines...
Or any lines.
Yeah, or heaven forbid, racial lines, Daniel.
Indeed. Not only is that bad for the country, but it's inconsistent with the whole purpose of why Menzies started the Liberal Party. He started the Liberal Party in part, because the UAP got smashed in 1943, but because the UAP had devolved itself into a factionalised sectional party, which is why it got drummed out of existence. That was the whole point of what Menzies set it up for. So if you're going to devolve into this sectional economic and cultural arguments, the Liberal Party will cease to exist, just like the UAP ceases to exist in the past.
And Hastie said that on the Four Corners report after the 2025 election, where he said there's nothing that guarantees the continuing existence of the Liberal Party. Just like as we're looking at the UK, there's nothing that guarantees the existence of the Tories in the UK.
Well, they're finished. They're finished. We'll get to the UK. Where you want to go? Yeah.
No,
you don't think they're finished?
I think they might well be. But I'm just going to say that's a big call. So
I think it's pretty passé.
So Farage is already Prime Minister?
I think it's pretty accepted that the Tories are done. What could save them? Change of leader? Who?
merger with Reform.
Well, that's already happening.
Yeah.
Tories are leaving and they're joining Reform. Tories will be a sort of a rump. There'll be a rump, 10 or 20 members. That'll be it. Kind of like the Lib Dems. They'll be the right-wing equivalent of the Lib Dems. And they deserve it. After being in government for 11 years, they trashed the place. You don't deserve to be back in government. The other thing that Hastie's been bringing up is energy. So coal and gas he talked about. What is interesting about this is he didn't talk about nuclear. And I think this is a really important thing to discuss. I don't think there should be a ban on nuclear power, but there is. The only way you can get rid of it is if you have the numbers in the Senate to get rid of the ban. I don't think that's going to happen probably for a long time. And the coalition had a policy around nuclear that it took to the election. Now, they say, well, Labor was unfair, that they said it's going to cost $600 billion. Yeah, welcome to politics. But even the Liberals' own costings had it at $270 billion,
Yep.
$290 billion. That's a lot of money as well. So it wasn't just the money cost. Even if they had a campaign on we want to spend close to $300 billion on nuclear plants, I don't think it would have flown with the electorate. I'm not sure that the centre-right has come to terms with the fact that that election campaign was so bad that it has set back the argument for nuclear power for many, many years now. And even if it's something that you can get up even if it's something that you can legislate in the short term, we all know it's going to take however many years to actually build and have a nuclear power plant online. Isn't it just obvious that we need coal and gas now?
Well, I would disagree that the election necessarily put back the nuclear argument. Labor is a long way away from accepting nuclear energy, but I think what the coalition's position on nuclear energy was simply a compromise. It was a sop. You know, I firmly believe in nuclear energy, but it's 15, 20 years away at best, and arguably is expensive, but that's a separate discussion. But what Hastie has done is he's torn away the shroud on energy policy and he's dared use the coal word. And the coalition is going to have to own up to this, and when the coalition eventually dumps net zero,
Which it will this year.
which that's your prediction.
No, it's going to happen. It's not a prediction.
And Susan Lee will keep her job because the coalition has dumped net zero. It cannot do so on the basis that Australia doesn't have a plan for the next 20 years until nuclear power comes online, if ever. There has to be a discussion about coal and gas. There has to be more than a discussion. There has to be a commitment to coal and gas, not on the basis that it's coal and gas, but on the basis that it's cheap, reliable and secure, and it maintains our sovereignty. And the coalition is going to have to drum into people's heads that over the last 20 years, Australia's gone from having the lowest power prices in the world to the highest. Our power prices are now twice those of the US. Our power prices have doubled in the last 2 decades, and this is not good for anyone. And the Teals can defend the doubling of power prices in the last 20 years.
Well, I think the other thing as well is the only reason the coalition adopted nuclear was as a fig leaf to keep net zero. They didn't want to get rid of net zero. So what the whole reason for it was we're not going to get rid of net zero because we're too scared to have a debate. So, but we can't do Labor's policy, or we have to come up with our own policy, or let's do nuclear. So they defaulted their way into it. That was the original sin of the whole thing.
And again, no one is thanking Hastie for calling out the original sin of demonising coal. And talking about demonising coal, our friends at the Page Research Centre have done an outstanding piece of analysis documenting the foreign money that is flowing to Australian NGOs to undermine Australia's energy security, our national security and our way of life.
Yes, you've got the figures. So I'll just set it up. So this comes in the context of there's a Senate committee process that's underway. So this is
into the IPA.
Into the IPA and anyone who doesn't zeitgeist.
Greens Greens initiated.
Yeah, so it's a Senate Committee on Information Integrity on Climate Change and Energy.
Hang on. Let's unpack information integrity.
So it says here, it's to inquire into the prevalence of the impact of misinformation, disinformation relates to climate change and energy. I agree. There's lots of misinformation.
Bring it on.
Renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy. How's that for?
Has the inquiry called in climate yet?
I don't think so. Misinformation such as, coal causes the temperature to increase around the world. That's the kind of misinformation that we want to get into. So this is chaired by Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who's a Green, so you can imagine it's going to be very balanced. Deputy Chair is a Labor senator from Victoria, so it's stacked out by the left. This is basically a way... So again, this will parlay nicely in... This shows that we're winning, right? I mean, why would you have a McCarthy's show trial into organisations like the IPA, Advanced Australia Page Research Centre, if you weren't losing the debate? They want to... The only debate the left can win is a debate that they don't allow to happen. And that's exactly what they're doing here.
That they shut down.
They're doing this to intimidate and bully their opponents into silence. That we're not going to be living around for 82 years. We're not going to stop now. But this shows that we are winning. And of course, what the left accuses other people of is what they do. The entire left-wing political operation is one big projection bias. Right? So they're saying, this is all foreign money coming in to organisations like the IPA to have this fake astroturfing of regional communities. The opposition to renewable energy doesn't really exist. It's like, okay, how many regional communities have you been to, Peter Whish-Wilson? Have you actually talked to these people? And of course, as you're going to say from the Page Research Centre, what they accuse us of is exactly what they do.
Well, before I talk about the Page Research Centre and their excellent research, I want you to commit to, when you give evidence, to start your statement with, this is a McCarthyist show trial.
It is. Well, I don't know if they'll call us. You can't just rock up. You can rock up and be a...
Well, given it's an inquiry into the IPA in advance, pretty much, they'll have to.
They don't have to, no. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. You can rock up in the gallery and sit there, but you can't just rock up and
then you
participate. You got
a banner and be kicked out.
Well,
yeah, ABC News.
Well, I was going to bring an Australian flag and get them to tell me it's a prop.
That would be controversial.
Yeah.
So our friends at the Page Research Centre identified that, for example, in 23-24, something like $170 million was spent with NGOs and green groups to deny the social licence of cheap energy, especially coal. They identified that a large part of this money is coming from overseas and overseas foundations, and they identified that groups like the Sunrise Project, Greenpeace, and of course the Environmental Defenders Office, also funded by the government, taxpayers, are doing their very best to undermine our energy security. And exactly as you said, the supposed groundswell against coal is not a groundswell against coal. It is a cleverly manipulated, well-funded program with the deliberate attempt to undermine Australia's energy and national security. And for me, what's interesting is the point of a democracy is debate. I think there's a question about foreign money flowing into the Australian political system, which I would love this Greens-dominated inquiry to investigate. But there's a broader point, which is you should absolutely have the right to say coal is destroying the country, the economy and the environment. But where is the response? These groups have been pushing against an open door. The coal industry, the energy industry, the resources sector as a whole has been too afraid not just to speak for themselves and defend themselves, but to speak for the country. And what we've seen is a completely one-sided debate. In a democracy, Greenpeace, the Australian Institute are entitled to go hell for leather. But that means that we ourselves have to go hell for leather. And as you said, other than Advance, Page, the IPA, certainly the Liberal Party hasn't been defending security.
There's some good individuals.
Some good individuals
within the party,
but the rest of the sector as a whole has been too easy and too quick to embrace net zero back in the day when Kevin Rudd first advanced the idea.
Well, exactly right. And I think the point here also is that this whole Senate committee is designed to basically... I think there's one of two ways it's going to go. It's either going to be a prelude into the government reintroducing misinformation laws under the guise that it's undermining net zero and therefore it's harming people, killing people and causing oceans to warm and so forth, and or it's going to be done to try to further turn the screws on donation laws whether it's in the political arena or civil society. So I think that potentially is what they're trying to sort of open the door to.
And they very well know that so much of the left-wing program is funded by the government and funded by donors who are identified as left. They're not going to be vilified. They're not going to be doxxed. They're not going to be attacked. But those who donate to non-left causes are entitled to their privacy because of all of the consequences that flow. And the left know that very well indeed. And this is potentially a fundamental threat to democracy.
It is. But I do think, as I said, I do think it's an example of how we've been winning on this debate. And
they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't afraid.
No. Now, I want to, speaking of, guess the quote, so I want to give you another quote, and this goes to how we're winning on something else.
So we moved on to our second favourite segment.
Our second favourite.
How we're winning.
My favourite one.
Yeah, well, it's my second favourite one.
I get
books.
Books.
But let's go to how we're winning.
How we're winning, but this is how we're winning on woke.
Give me causes for optimism, Dan.
So I want to give you a quote again, and you guess who it came from. Young men used to make up a big cohort of Labor voters. A lot feel as if they have no one representing them from any party, end quote.
Oh, that could be, I don't know, Jordan Peterson talking about Australian politics.
It could be. It's a guy called Tom Koutsantonis, who I know being a South Australian. He is the newly minted South Australian Treasurer. He's been in politics for a very long time. And he also said, I'm very worried about the woke agenda.
So why would he be saying this, Dan?
Because he's not dumb. And Labor is not dumb. There are certain operators within the Labor Party that understand exactly the things that you and I talk about, that Australians don't like the woke agenda, that it is divisive, and that young men in particular are being turned off and turned away from the Labor Party and from the left precisely because of political correctness and wokeness. It also comes at the back of South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas saying that he wanted to see the end of woke.
Well, and he said in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, the ALP must act in concert with where the mainstream is. So these are fine words coming from the right of the Labor Party. Dan, you're a South Australian. How is the South Australian government putting these fine words into action?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So they've got the state, they're the only state with a voice to Parliament, an Aboriginal voice to Parliament, but they had a 2/3 no vote. Now Victoria will have something much worse soon, but it's the only state with a voice to Parliament. It is literally, I think it was only 2 days after Koutsantonis said this, there was an edict into schools, including into South Australian schools, that teachers shouldn't say boys and girls, they need to be more gender inclusive. And what has the South Australian government said about this?
So that means the media in South Australia, the Liberal Party, civil society would have been calling upon the Labor Party to put into practice what they are pretending to say.
Crickets. So this is how they get away with it. They get away with it because they can do two things at once. They can say, we don't like woke, it's divisive, and we're not doing it.
Because it is divisive and polls show Australians don't want it.
So they can do it.
Yep.
They can say that we're not going to do it, and at the exact same time do it.
How good are they?
That's why they occupy the entire... So South Australia is a model federally for how to occupy the political...
It's a model for your political hero.
Thomas Playford. Well, Malinauskas, in my theory, Malinauskas is the left-wing equivalent of Thomas Playford. Because there was a Labor leader, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, during Playford's almost 3-decade tenure as Premier. And they basically just gave up at trying to win. And he said that Playford is the best Labor leader we've ever had. Well, I think Malinauskas is the best Liberal leader we've ever had. Occupy the spectrum because there's a lack of contest and debate.
Well, and I think, and speaking as a Victorian, I saw how Daniel Andrews intimidated the Liberal Party into submission. And again, looking across the border from Melbourne into South Australia, the same thing seems to be happening with Malinauskas, that the Liberal Party seems to be, and his critics generally, Liberal or not, seem to be intimidated into criticism of him for fear that he will respond and that as a clever political operator he will beat them. But until people like Andrews or Malinauskas or Albanese are challenged, they will continue to gain an ascendancy. And when you point out the contradiction between what he says he believes in and what he actually does, the public will come to understand that.
Well, the other thing is you have to force them to choose.
Yeah.
Now, they might choose the right answer. They might choose to get rid of woke, stare down the left of their party. Great. But they probably won't. They probably won't be able to do that. So you have to actually force a contest of your political opponents. And as we have said time and time again, culture is the thing that divides the left and unites the right.
Yeah, so this is interesting because we've spoken about this a few times. So federal Labor operative Erickson,
Paul Erickson, the National Secretary,
who ran Labor's very successful election campaign, didn't he go to the press club and say, don't talk about culture, don't do culture wars, that turns off Australians?
So he said that to the Liberal Party.
So he said that
not saying about Labor.
So he said to the Liberals, you can't talk about culture,
but we can, yeah.
But we will, and we're going to own the space.
Yeah, because they play to win. They're not dumb.
So to come back full circle to Andrew Hastie, so when you have all these Liberals telling Andrew Hastie, don't do culture, don't talk about social cohesion, don't talk about national values, don't talk about the Australian way of life, why don't they just take a leaf out of Malinowskis's book, arguably now the most successful politician in Australia after the departure of Dan Andrews?
It's a good question. But I also want to sort of talk about the UK before. So this is another example of kind of a similar thing happening, but in the UK with Keir Starmer. Now, in the UK, we've seen lots of people putting up the flag of the UK, painting the flag on roundabouts and the St George Cross and things like that. So it's become a real, not so much a sign of rebellion, but this is the way that typical British people feel they can have their voices heard.
Well, I think it is a sign of rebellion. It's overdue, but it is also a sign that the community are sick of their traditions and heritage being trashed. And it's very hard as a member of the community to respond to what elites are doing to our culture, our history, what we are telling our children. But what you can do is you can fly the George Cross.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
Yeah.
So Malinowskis has taught Keir Starmer what to do.
Well, it looks that way. So there was a convention or a conference that was held.
It was a Labor conference.
Yeah, in the UK. And of course, that's where Anthony Albanese, because it's very politically smart to stand next to the most unpopular Prime Minister in the UK's history. But Keir Starmer said at this conference, fly those flags. Labor, as in the Labor Party, is for working people, for national renewal and the Patriotic Party. So even Keir Starmer has to say these words. He doesn't believe any of it. He's not going to do anything about it. It's just like when he had that speech about migration, which was a great speech. He said that basically there's too much. It's turning us into an island of strangers and we're going to do something about it. He will never do anything about it. This will not change anything. But even he knows he has to mouth the words, which again shows that we know that we're winning. It's going to take time to get a political outcome
from the rhetoric that we've started.
From the rhetoric, but we are going to get there. And we often talk about polling that we've done, and we've got some new polling to talk about that shows why we're getting there and how we're winning. So I think last time we talked about some polling we had on sports, on woke.
And there was the numbers, especially on young people reacting to the woke agenda of the sports organisations was astonishing. And before we go on to the rest of it, I'm going to give you another example that's happened just in the last few days of why Australians are sick of woke sports organisations. So when we revert to our little AFL segment on Mainstream, we can talk about the fact that last year there were at a end of season function, there were some football players at GWS. There was a player who simulated an inappropriate act, and he was suspended for 4 weeks. The AFL said this was offensive, this was inappropriate. We want to send a very strong signal. Okay. After Geelong lost the grand final a week ago, the Geelong players had their end of season celebrations. 3 Geelong players turned up to those celebrations, were photographed in the costume of the Irish band NECAP. The Irish band Kneecap is well known for its sympathy with Hezbollah, its attitudes to Israel, and were those players suspended, challenged, reprimanded? Nope. So we can mainstream support for Hezbollah. We can mainstream support for anti-Semitism, and the AFL will look the other way.
Well, the other funny thing about ironic thing about the AFL is it gets a lot of money from gambling advertisers. So how are they moral arbiters when they receive millions and millions of dollars from gambling?
So that's why 70% of Australians are sick of woke sports organisations.
You're right.
But you've got more optimistic polling.
Well, I've got more optimistic polling. Why don't we start with that one? So we asked the question: do you believe the AFL or sporting codes? And we said AFL, NRL, Cricket Australia has become too politically correct. So 64% of Australians said yep. That's up from 61% when we asked the same question in 2022. Now, check this out. Of 18 to 24-year-olds, in 2022, it was 52% that said it's too politically correct. It is now 78% in just 3 years. So there's a margin of error in these polls, which is about 3 to 3.5%. So even if you say, well, actually, it was maybe 55% 3 years ago and now it's down to 75%, you're talking about a 20% change. Like, this is well and truly a real thing that is happening. Like, there's no way you can explain this away through sampling, through margin of error, through polling issues. There is absolutely a real thing.
And it's consistent with the deep analysis that's been done of the 2024 US presidential election, whereby under 25s especially are identified as more conservative. So a lot of commentators, a lot of pollsters, a lot of the political parties themselves tend to categorise under 35s as a single homogenous group. That is not the case at all. It might well be that 25s to 35s are lost to freedom for the foreseeable future, but those under 25, under 24, there is a real cohort of people reacting to the cultural climate. We saw that, as we've talked about, in the polling on The Voice. 44% of Australians between the ages of 18 to 24 voted no. 55% of men of that age voted no. So it's not a majority across the whole population, but it's a lot of people. And when you put that on top of the fact that the Liberal Party in the coalition is polling at 20% with that cohort, it shows you the potential uplift for a political party that wants to speak to these people.
And what's interesting is, you're right, there is a bit of a U-shape in the polling.
Yeah.
And this is why the whole thing about hammering the boomers to appease young people's dumb, because the boomers and the youngest cohort have the same values.
They do.
This is the whole dumb thing that these pollsters don't
Under
understand.
24s and over 65.
That's the
think the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they want similar things.
Yeah.
So us millennials got lost in the wash somewhere. So
Somehow, yeah. I might not be a millennial.
No, you're not a millennial. You'd be a Gen X.
Yeah.
I would have thought Gen X, all right.
Close to a boomer.
Close to a boomer. But this is just frustrating. But so what was that one? Politically correct. Oh, I love Welcome to Country. 63.
Well, what are the numbers on Welcome to Country?
63% don't want it at sporting events, and that's 72% of 18 to 24-year-olds.
What's the number for 18 to 24-year-olds?
72. I like that a little bit higher, but 72 is not bad.
So how are the sporting codes reacting to this? Ignoring it, of course.
Doing more of it, I assume. I don't watch if I watch sport, I only turn it on right at the time that the bounce happens. Not that they're doing the bounce anymore. They're freaking everything's kicking.
That's the end of tradition. Yeah. Thanks for the legacy.
Yeah. But I like this one because what really annoys me more than any of this in sport is when people like Pat Cummins and Usman Khawaja use their platform to campaign for personal political causes. But I guarantee you, if there was a different player that instead of, so Usman Khawaja had some stupid thing on his shoes, whatever, I can't remember what cause it was. Imagine someone ran out with the Australian flag on their shoes. Or they would be suspended and fined and told that they're a naughty boy. But Usman Khawaja, you can still open the batting. 77% say it's wrong that professional athletes are using their positions to campaign for personal political causes. And that includes 80% of 18 to 24-year-olds.
Give me that number again.
77%. It's wrong that professional athletes use their positions to campaign for personal political
And the 18 to
causes.
24, give me more, as Trump would say, give me more winning.
80% for
80%.
Yeah. So
All right, okay, so let's say, and these are a range of different polls. So let's say the polling's skewed. Let's say that a whole bunch of members of Turning Point Australia somehow answered this done at a poll. Let's take it down by 20%.
yeah.
Let's take it down by 30%. Let's halve it.
Yeah.
Still, overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
young people don't want this. They get it.
Yeah.
So what is the Labor Party with the support of the Liberal Party doing to under 16-year-olds? Banning their social media so you can't hear about this.
Yeah. Yep.
Liberal Party.
I want to give you one more, which is close to my favourite. It's my second favourite.
You've got a lot of favourites.
Well, it's all good. It's all good stuff, isn't it? I mean, I just can't stand these sports players that do this stuff. I think we talked about this last week, but I love it. Players who don't sing the anthem should be kicked out of the team. Which is true. Like if you're in the national sporting team,
What if you don't know the words?
You got to learn it. If you don't know the words, that's even worse. 63%.
See, I mean,
Come on, don't go soft.
so go.
Don't go soft.
Yeah, well, I am soft on legalising the burning of the flag, which I don't support.
Yeah, you are soft on that.
Okay, so give me the
I'm looking
numbers.
forward to the comments. 63%.
Roskam's weak.
63% of Australians say you should be kicked out of the sporting team if you don't sing the anthem. 81% of 18 to 24-year-olds.
I think you should be kicked out of the Australian cricket team if you're from New South Wales. I think that's a bigger priority.
I would take an opening batter with an average of 30 who loves our country than an opening batter with the average of 50 who hates our country. And I think most Australians would agree with that.
Yeah, but you've just demonstrated how woke you are. What's this word batter?
I'm inclusive. I'm very inclusive, John. We can do your favourite segment now.
Okay.
That was my favourite segment.
Okay, so one of the best parts of travelling overseas for marathons is the stack of books you get to read. So I'll talk about that at a future episode. But Dan, Essays for Australia from the Institute of Public Affairs has just come out. It will be sent to Premier IPA members and it will be available on the web for the world for free to read very soon. It's a terrific collection of articles about the federal election and what went wrong and what went right for the coalition and for Conservatives, which is not much. There's a terrific article by Alan Hurd, great IPA member, and the surname that will be famous to AFL supporters about sport and our way of life. And Alan makes the point that sport, and this comes to exactly what we were just talking about, sport was once the great unifier. Catholics, Protestants, working class, middle class, the wealthy could come together and support the same team on an equal basis. But sport has now been captured by political elites who want to divide us and carry over the division of society and the community into the sporting field. So Alan's done a wonderful article about that. And there's also some book reviews. We've talked about the wonderful collection of essays by Frank Knoffelmarker out from Connor Court. So that's been reviewed. And we also have a review of a book that's come out a little while ago, but is still hugely relevant, Our Enemy, the Government, by a friend of the IPA and great political scientist, Ramesh Thakur, who talks about the legacy of COVID that lingers to this day. Our colleague here at the IPA, Adam Crichton, did a wonderful piece in The Australian last week that, again, I was able to read thanks to the marvels of the internet while I was in Europe, on the admission that's basically been ignored by the mainstream media of Brett Sutton, the Chief Health Officer during the COVID episode in Victoria. Where Brett Sutton basically said most of the measures put in place were unnecessary. So the front page coverage of that is where, Daniel?
Here on the mainstream.
Because the media, the elites, were enthusiastic supporters of the totalitarian, authoritarian powers that governments exercised over COVID, which we now know were for little or no purpose, or worse, produced negative results.
Yeah.
Bad results. And it was interesting, again, a point that here in Victoria the mainstream media have largely glossed over. Police officials talking about the epidemic of youth crime said one of the reasons for that, one of the explanations for that, is young people were locked up for years in their rooms. What did we think the consequences would be, not just for learning outcomes, for educational outcomes, for the development of interpersonal relations, the consequences of what we did to ourselves and what we allowed to happen will flow for decades.
Yep. But what I love about this, so this is the third volume.
Third volume.
So you've got to figure out a way of getting this out there more, because it's one of the only publications that thinks about these things deeper. What I love about it is it reminds you how great our country is. It has different angles to it. And
there's a lot of us who believe that.
Most. As this polling shows, most of us believe it. And the key takeaway from today's discussion, John, is that young people and boomers have the same values, and that is the political constituency for the future of the centre-right.
The political constituency for the future of the centre-right is the support of those who love this place. That is our country.
Well, we'll end it on that note, John. Good to chat.